Even when the guns go silent, evil still wears a uniform. He was a Navy SEAL who served 20 years, a soldier betrayed by the very system he swore to protect. Disgraced and broken, he vanished with his scars and his loyal German shepherd. But fate called him back, a cry for help from a moving train. A detective bound and bleeding for exposing a secret network of officers trading weapons and human lives. That night, the soldier returned. And what he and his dog did next would reveal the darkness hidden beneath the flag they once defended. Before we begin, tell us where you're watching from. And if this story moves you, please subscribe for more. The Texas night was hot enough to make the steel tracks shimmer. The freight train roared through the darkness, its wheels screaming over the rails as sparks danced beneath the carriages. Inside one of the cargo cars, Ethan Ward, a 40-year-old former Navy SEAL, sat quietly with his back against a crate, his dog Rex lying beside him. Ethan's face, half hidden beneath the shadow of his worn cap, carried the sharp lines of a man shaped by war and silence. His jaw was square, his beard short and salt and pepper, his eyes a hard gray blue that missed nothing. The scars on his forearms told more truth than his medals ever could. He had the posture of someone who could rest in chaos, yet wake at the sound of a pin drop. Ethan had left the service 2 years ago, not by choice but by the politics of men in suits. His refusal to cover up an illegal mission had cost him his career. Now he lived on the move, avoiding questions, avoiding people. His only companion was Rex, a 6-year-old German shepherd with black and tan fur, strong shoulders, and an intelligent, watchful gaze. Rex wasn't just a dog. He was Ethan's partner, his conscience, the last living reminder of loyalty that hadn't betrayed him. The train rattled through the still air, heading east toward the Mississippi. Ethan wasn't going anywhere in particular, only away. He leaned his head back, listening to the rhythm of the wheels, until a sound cut through the clatter. A muffled thump, faint but distinct, followed by a scraping noise from the next car. Rex lifted his head immediately, ears erect, muscles tensing. Ethan's eyes opened. He heard it again. A human sound, a cry strangled by distance and pain. He grabbed his pack, moved to the sliding door, and peered into the night. The world outside was a blur of black fields and ghostly moonlight. He jumped to the adjacent car, landing softly on the metal floor. The smell hit him first, something metallic and sharp, like rust mixed with blood. He drew his combat knife, the blade catching the dim glow from a swinging overhead bulb. Rex followed close, silent but alert, nostrils flaring. At the far end of the car, between 2 cargo pallets, Ethan found her. Grace Miller was crumpled on her side, wrists bound with coarse rope, her blouse torn, her face streaked with grime and dried blood. She looked about 35, lean, medium height, and pale under the flickering light. Her dark auburn hair was tangled, sticking to her sweat-damp skin. Even in her battered state, there was a stubborn strength in her jawline, a spark in her half-lidded green eyes that hadn't been beaten out of her. Ethan crouched beside her, cutting the ropes. "You can talk?" he whispered. Her voice came out broken and raw. "They're coming back. Please." He looked around. "Who's they?" "The men who run this train," she rasped. "They work for Hale, the one who sells soldiers to the highest bidder." The name hit him like a cold wind. Victor Hale, once a high-ranking logistics officer, later rumored to have vanished with millions in weapons contracts. Ethan had heard whispers of him, of a network that trafficked more than guns across borders. "Why are they after you?" Ethan asked, his knife sawing through the last knot. "I'm a detective," Grace said, breathing hard. "Las Vegas Metro. I was tracking a trail of missing people, women and children. It led back to the Army's supply lines. Hale's people found me before I could send the report." Ethan's eyes narrowed. He had seen the same rot during his last mission, the kind of evil that hid behind rank and salutes. He opened his mouth to ask more, but Rex growled, low and deep. "Boots. 3, maybe 4 pairs. Coming closer." Ethan's instincts switched from caution to combat in a heartbeat. He grabbed Grace, pulling her behind a crate. The car door clanged open, and a harsh flashlight beam cut through the dark. 4 men climbed in, armed, confident, laughing. They wore desert camo without insignia, mercenaries playing soldier. "Search the back," one barked. "Hale wants her alive. The other one, kill him." Ethan's pulse slowed, not from fear but from focus. His right hand slid to his Glock. His left signaled Rex. The dog's muscles coiled like a drawn bow. When the first mercenary stepped past the crate, Ethan moved. A flash, a muffled shot, and the man crumpled without a sound. Chaos erupted. The second man fired blindly. Bullets punched through crates, spilling dust and splinters. Rex launched from the shadows, slamming into him, teeth sinking into flesh. Ethan rolled behind a drum, returned fire, one round to the shoulder, another to the knee. Grace, trembling but conscious, crawled toward a fallen weapon. Her fingers shook as she picked it up, a sidearm heavier than she'd ever used. She pointed it at the third man, who was raising his rifle toward Ethan. She squeezed the trigger. The blast kicked her hand back, but the bullet found its mark. Silence. Then the last mercenary cursed and ran for the door. Ethan let him go. He could chase ghosts later. Right now, survival mattered more. He turned to Grace. "Can you move?" She nodded weakly. "I think so." The train jolted, picking up speed as it approached the river bridge. Ethan looked out the door. Black water churned below, moonlight flashing off the current. "They'll have backup," he said. "If we stay, we die." Grace looked terrified. "Then what do we do?" He didn't answer. He grabbed her hand, slung her arm around his shoulder, and gave Rex a short whistle. Then he jumped. The wind tore the breath from his lungs. The world exploded in cold and sound. The impact hit like a hammer, the river swallowing them whole. Grace screamed, the sound smothered by rushing water. Ethan surfaced, gasping, pulling her up with one arm while Rex paddled beside them, fur slicked and glistening. The train thundered on, vanishing into the night. Minutes later, the current carried them toward a narrow sandbar, a small island lit by fireflies and the silver shimmer of the moon. Ethan dragged Grace ashore and collapsed beside her. The world was still except for the distant rumble of thunder and the slow, ragged rhythm of their breathing. Rex circled once, then lay beside them, his eyes on the dark horizon. Ethan turned to Grace, brushing wet hair from her face. "You're safe," he said quietly. "But if you're right about Hale, we're not done yet." Grace's lips trembled. "Why are you helping me?" Ethan looked toward the sky, a blank stretch of stars above the Mississippi. "Because I've seen what happens when good people stay silent." The fireflies blinked around them, tiny sparks in the humid air, like ghosts of all the lives still waiting to be saved. Dawn crept over the river like a slow-moving flame, painting the sky with streaks of amber and copper. The small sandbar where they had washed ashore glistened with morning dew, the air thick with the scent of silt and wet grass. Ethan Ward stirred first, his back aching from the rough ground. his instincts already awake before his eyes opened. Beside him, Rex, his 6-year-old German shepherd, lay curled like a dark sentinel, his fur matted but his breathing steady. A faint, raspy cough drew Ethan's attention to the woman lying a few feet away. Grace Miller was stirring, her body trembling from the chill, the bruises along her arms visible even in the early light. Ethan crouched beside her, holding out a canteen. "Drink slow," he murmured. Grace took it with shaking hands. Her lips were cracked, her voice a whisper of exhaustion. "Where are we?" "Somewhere in the middle of the Mississippi," he said. "The current threw us here. We're safe for now." He had already gathered driftwood and built a small fire using his flint striker. The smoke rose lazily, curling upward into the open sky. Grace winced as she shifted, a low moan escaping her throat. Ethan's hands, steady and practiced, opened a small medic pouch. "Hold still." He disinfected the cuts on her wrists and arms with careful precision, his expression neutral, almost detached. But behind the steel in his eyes, something softer flickered. Concern, maybe guilt, maybe both. Grace studied him quietly. His face was the kind that looked carved from stone. Hard edges, a small scar under the right eye. The kind of man who carried more memories than words. "You were military," she said finally. Ethan didn't look up. "Was?" She hesitated, sensing the weight of the word. "What happened?" He tightened the bandage around her arm before answering. "I told the truth to the wrong people. Turns out honor doesn't look good on paperwork." He sat back, wiping sweat from his brow with a torn sleeve. Grace's eyes softened. "I know that feeling." They sat in silence for a while, the fire popping softly between them. When Grace spoke again, her tone was heavier, as if peeling back something she had kept locked away too long. "I wasn't supposed to be here. I was supposed to be home with my son." Ethan looked up. "You have a kid?" She nodded slowly. "Liam. He's 5. Her lips quivered into something that wasn't quite a smile. "Smart, curious, loves airplanes. I told him his mom was a detective who caught bad guys, but I never told him how close they can get." Ethan watched her, his expression unreadable, but there was a flicker of recognition in his eyes. A man who knew what it was like to lose everything except the mission. "Does he know where you are?" Grace shook her head. "No, I had to disappear. If Hale's people knew about him..." She trailed off, voice breaking. The thought of her son alone somewhere gnawed at her chest. "I left him with a friend in Dallas. Safe house. At least I hope it still is." Ethan fed another stick into the fire, the flame reflected in his eyes like twin shards of steel. "Sentinel Dynamics," he said quietly, testing the name. Grace's gaze snapped to him. "You know it?" "I've heard rumors," Ethan replied. "Contractor group formed after the wars. Officially, Security Logistics. Unofficially, they do what the government doesn't want to admit doing." Grace leaned forward, wincing. "They're not just moving weapons, Ethan. They're moving people. Refugees, runaways, anyone they can sell. I followed a lead from El Paso. A shipment labeled medical supplies. When customs flagged it, Sentinel made it disappear. I tracked it to Hale." Ethan's jaw clenched. Victor Hale, the name that had haunted whispers in every base and barrack. Once a logistics colonel, discharged under classified circumstances, he had resurfaced with money, men, and influence, enough to vanish entire operations. Rex's ears perked up. A soft growl vibrated in his throat. Ethan tensed instantly, his hand dropping to his sidearm. Grace froze. "What is it?" "Someone's coming." Ethan said. He rose silently, moving to the tree line. Through the dense willows, a figure appeared, an older man in a sun-bleached hat, carrying a fishing net and a wooden crate. His clothes were rough, his posture bent from years under the sun. Ethan stepped out, gun lowered but ready. "Easy, friend." The man startled, then raised both hands. "Whoa now, no need for that." His voice was deep but worn, his southern drawl thick. "Name's Calvin Dorsey. I run a bait shack downriver. Saw your fire smoke." Ethan scanned him, mid-60s, wiry build, face weathered like cracked leather, eyes surprisingly clear. A good man, maybe too curious for his own safety. Calvin looked past him and spotted Grace. "Lord Almighty, what happened to her?" "She fell," Ethan said simply. Calvin squinted. "That the kind of fall leaves bullet holes?" His gaze sharpened. He wasn't stupid. "You two in trouble?" Ethan didn't answer, but Grace did. "We're trying to stop bad men, Mr. Dorsey. The kind who think they own the world." The old man studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "Then I guess you're on the right side." He dropped his crate. "Got some dry clothes, first aid, and maybe a boat you could borrow. But if anyone asks, I never saw you." Ethan gave a curt nod. "Appreciate it." While Grace changed into a clean flannel shirt and jeans Calvin had brought, Ethan walked a few yards away, scanning the riverbanks. His mind raced through tactical routes, extraction options, probabilities. Every instinct told him to disappear, but something in Grace's voice, the mention of the children, the trafficking, had triggered an old promise he once made to a dying teammate. "If you see hell coming for the innocent, you stand between them." Calvin helped them load supplies into a small aluminum boat. "Current's rough this time of year," he warned, "but there's a place upriver, Old Ranger Cabin. Not many go there." Grace thanked him softly. "Why help strangers?" Calvin smiled faintly, the corners of his eyes crinkling. "'Cause once, some strangers helped me. Vietnam, 72. I learned the good ones don't ask for payment." As they pushed off the island, the boat rocked gently against the current. Rex sat at the bow, ears up, eyes scanning the horizon. Grace held her bandaged wrist, staring at the water reflecting the sky. Ethan steered, silent as ever, but inside his chest a slow fire was burning. Grace finally spoke, voice soft against the wind. "If we take down Hale, it won't just clear my name. It'll stop this whole thing, Sentinel, the trafficking, the weapons." Ethan nodded. "Then we'll do it." She looked at him, surprised. "You're in?" He met her eyes. "I've been fighting ghosts for too long. Maybe it's time I fought something real." As the boat drifted northward, the sun rose higher, gold light slicing through the mist. Behind them, the small island shrank into memory, a place where two broken souls and a dog had survived the river and made a choice that would change everything. By the time the boat reached the muddy banks outside Memphis, the sun had risen high and mean, beating down on the river like molten brass. The city skyline shimmered beyond the haze. Glass towers and old brick warehouses, a contradiction of decay and pride. Ethan Ward steered the small aluminum boat into a narrow inlet, scanning for movement. His clothes were still damp from the night before, his beard rough with 2 days of exhaustion, but his eyes were sharp, always calculating. Grace Miller sat beside him, wrapped in a flannel shirt borrowed from Calvin. Her skin was pale from fever and bruises, yet her jaw held that same quiet defiance that refused to break. Rex, their German shepherd, stood alert on the bow, nose twitching at every scent of the river wind. Grace led them to a small apartment complex near South Main Street, tucked between an abandoned bookstore and a rundown cafe. The building looked like it hadn't been renovated since the 90s. Faded red bricks, half-lit hallways, and the faint smell of dust and mildew. Inside, her apartment was simple but orderly. Toys stacked in a corner, drawings taped on the fridge, a pair of tiny sneakers near the door. Ethan took it all in silently, his gaze pausing on a framed photo. Grace holding a boy no older than 5, his blonde curls wild, his grin unguarded. Liam. Grace's hand trembled slightly as she straightened the frame. "He's safe," she said, mostly to herself. "He's with a friend. I just needed to see this again." Ethan nodded, scanning the apartment with a soldier's instincts. Something felt off. Rex's ears twitched. The dog let out a low growl and padded toward the living room. Ethan followed. Rex sniffed the carpet, then stopped at the baseboard heater, his tail stiff. Ethan knelt, running his fingers along the floor. There, a faint click of metal under his touch. He pried it loose and pulled out a small black object the size of a thumb drive, a listening device. "They've been here," he said. Grace's face went pale. "How long?" Ethan turned the device over, noting a serial number etched faintly on the casing. "Military grade. This isn't some street thug. It's Sentinel tech." He placed it gently on the table. "They're tracking you, Grace." She bit her lip hard, eyes wet with anger. "Then we need to turn this around on them." Ethan gave a short nod. "We will. But we need someone who knows their network." He reached into his duffel and pulled out a knife wrapped in cloth. The handle bore a faint engraving, the insignia of Sentinel Dynamics. He had taken it from the train fight. "This came from one of Hale's men, and I know who forged these." Grace looked up. "Who?" Ethan hesitated. The name tasted like rust. "Jack Mercer. He used to be one of us. Same SEAL team 15 years ago. Now he runs Sentinel Dynamics as CEO." Grace frowned. "Would he help you?" Ethan's expression hardened. "He'll have to." That evening, the streets of Memphis buzzed under neon signs and the hum of summer traffic. They parked an old pickup Ethan had borrowed from a friendly mechanic and approached a glass tower downtown, Sentinel Dynamics headquarters. From the outside, it looked legitimate. Polished steel, mirrored windows, and security guards in crisp uniforms. But Ethan knew what lay behind that facade. The black contracts, the missing cargo, the quiet disappearances. They waited until the building emptied for the night. Grace adjusted her cap, her eyes scanning the rooftop cameras. Ethan used a small jammer he'd salvaged years ago to distort the feed. They slipped through the side entrance with Rex padding silently behind. The elevator hummed as they rose to the top floor. When the doors opened, Jack Mercer was already there, as if expecting them. He stood by a glass wall overlooking the city lights, his back straight, his suit immaculate. Jack was in his early 40s, tall and athletic, his once boyish face now cut with deep lines from years of command. His hair, a slick silver blonde, reflected the glow from the skyline. He had the controlled calm of a man who had learned to survive in boardrooms instead of battlefields. "Ethan Ward," Jack said, his voice smooth but heavy. "I wondered when you'd crawl out of the shadows." Ethan stepped forward slowly, eyes never leaving him. "You're working for Hale." Jack's lips twitched into something between a smirk and regret. "Working with him. There's a difference." Grace spoke up, her voice sharp. "You're trafficking people under military contracts? How many women and children died for your difference?" Jack's composure faltered for a moment before he exhaled, leaning against his desk. You think I wanted this? You think I had a choice? He poured himself a drink, hands trembling. Hale owns the network, Grace. He owns the generals, the transport lines, the data. I tried to walk away once. They sent a message. My wife didn't survive it. The words hung in the air like smoke. Ethan's anger cooled into grim understanding. Jack wasn't a villain, just another man broken by the same machine Ethan had walked away from. Then help us, Ethan said quietly. Give us something we can use. Jack hesitated, then opened a drawer, pulling out a small encrypted tablet. Every route, every shipment, every name. But if Hale finds out I gave this to you— He won't, Ethan interrupted. We'll take him down before he gets the chance. As they turned to leave, an alarm suddenly blared. Red lights flashed across the ceiling. Jack cursed under his breath. He knows. The glass wall exploded inward, shards raining like ice. Armed men in tactical black flooded the office. Hale's mercenaries. Ethan pushed Grace down, drew his weapon, and fired. Rex lunged at the nearest intruder, teeth flashing. Jack grabbed his sidearm from the desk and joined in, the old soldier's reflexes returning like muscle memory. The gunfight was brutal and fast. Ethan's bullets found their marks with precision, but the numbers kept coming. One mercenary hurled a grenade. Jack kicked it under a desk just as it detonated, blowing out the corner wall. Smoke filled the room. Go! Jack shouted. Take the tablet and run! Ethan grabbed Grace's arm. Rex covered their retreat, snapping and growling as they crashed through the emergency stairwell. The sound of helicopters thundered outside. Hale's men weren't letting them go easily. By the time they reached the parking level, the city's sirens were echoing like war drums. They dove into the pickup, tires screeching as Ethan sped into the maze of Memphis streets. Grace clutched the tablet to her chest, breathing hard. We have the proof, she said. Ethan glanced in the rearview mirror, smoke rising from the tower, helicopters circling above. Yeah, he said grimly. But now they know we're coming. The desert night in Santa Rosa was alive with heat and silence. The kind of silence that felt heavy, like it was waiting for something to break. The wind carried a dry, dusty scent across the sand, whispering through the remains of an old military training base. The stars above were sharp and white, too clean for what lay below. Ethan Ward, his face streaked with sweat and dust, crouched behind a rusted Jeep frame, binoculars pressed to his eyes. The glow of floodlights illuminated the chain-link fences and corrugated containers spread across the compound like a graveyard of metal. Beside him, Grace Miller adjusted her cap, her auburn hair tied back beneath it, her face hardened by the mission ahead. There was no trace of the fear she had shown days ago, only resolve. The bruises on her arms had faded, replaced by a cold determination. That's them, she whispered, pointing toward the cluster of containers near the far fence. Shipment Alpha 9. Jack said that's where they keep them before transport. Ethan lowered the binoculars, jaw clenched. They're not cargo, he said quietly. They're people. Rex, the German shepherd, stood next to him, his fur blending with the shadows, ears twitching at the faint hum of engines beyond the wall. His nose moved slightly, catching traces of oil, sweat, and fear. Ethan reached out and patted his side. Not yet, boy. Wait for my mark. Grace checked her watch. 11:43 p.m. The Border Patrol convoy she had called anonymously would arrive in 20 minutes, if they came at all. The rest depended on stealth, timing, and faith. Ethan's plan was simple but brutal. Get in, open the containers, guide the victims to safety before Hale's men realized what was happening. They moved low and fast through the sand. The fence line loomed ahead, topped with barbed wire and patched with old warning signs. Ethan pulled out wire cutters, slicing through with quick precision. Grace slipped through the gap, the sound of crickets and distant humming filling the air. Once inside, they crept between abandoned barracks and rusting vehicles until they reached the containers. From inside one came a soft sound, a muffled sob followed by a cough. Grace's heart clenched. She crouched, placing her ear against the metal door. There's someone in here. Ethan knelt beside the lock, industrial, thick, reinforced with a steel bar. He pulled a small charge from his vest. Step back. The detonation was a dull pop, barely more than a sigh, and the lock fell free. The door creaked open. The stench hit them first. Sweat, blood, urine, despair. Then came the faces, dozens of them. Men, women, children, their skin blistered from heat, eyes hollow and wide with terror. One young girl couldn't have been older than 10. Her dark hair clung to her face as she clutched a torn teddy bear. Grace's throat tightened. Oh, God. Ethan raised a hand. Quiet, he whispered, his tone calm, steady. You're safe now. We're getting you out. He signaled Rex forward. The dog moved softly through the darkness, sniffing along the path toward the outer gate. Rex turned back and gave a low bark. The signal was clear. Multiple guards approaching from the east. Ethan cursed under his breath. They're circling back. He turned to Grace. You lead them to the trucks behind the hangar. I'll draw their fire. Grace grabbed his arm. You can't take them all on. I don't need to. I just need to slow them down. He slipped into the shadows before she could argue. The mercenaries appeared moments later, 5 men dressed in desert tactical gear, rifles slung over their shoulders. The leader was tall and lean, with a jagged scar across his cheek and a lazy confidence in his stride. His name was Ramon Diaz, a former Border Patrol sergeant turned smuggler, known for his cruelty and precision. His face was weathered by years of heat and violence, his eyes sharp with suspicion. Ramon motioned to his men. Check the containers. Hale wants everything tight tonight. As they spread out, Ethan struck. A sharp whistle, Rex lunged from behind a crate, taking one man down with a snarl. Ethan fired twice, silencer hissing in the night. 2 bodies fell. Ramon spun around, shouting in Spanish, Aquí, los tenemos! Here, we've got them! Bullets tore through the sand. Ethan ducked behind a concrete wall, returning fire in measured bursts. Meanwhile, Grace herded the freed captives toward the hangar. Some stumbled, weak and delirious. Others carried children too tired to cry. She found herself guiding a woman with gray-streaked hair, Marisol Vega, late 40s, tall but gaunt, with eyes that spoke of too many horrors. The woman clung to Grace's arm and whispered hoarsely, Please, my sister, she's still inside. Grace turned back toward the containers, another locked one still sealed shut. Stay with them, she said, and sprinted back. She broke the lock with Ethan's spare cutter and yanked the door open. More people, dozens. Sweat and heat poured out like a breath from hell. Ethan's radio crackled. 2 minutes until Border Patrol. Grace's voice came through. He grimaced, blood seeping through his shoulder. A bullet had grazed him. Copy, he said, wiping the crimson with his sleeve. Get them moving. The firefight intensified. Ramon, now furious, reloaded his rifle, scanning for the intruder. He spotted Ethan's silhouette and fired a burst. The bullets tore through a fuel barrel, igniting a wave of fire that roared into the night. Ethan dove aside, the heat searing his skin. Rex barked wildly, leaping through the flames to cover him. Then came the sound that split the desert. Sirens. Dozens of them. Red and blue lights flared over the dunes as Border Patrol vehicles stormed into the compound, their tires spitting sand. Ramon's men scattered. Grace waved frantically, guiding the survivors toward safety. One patrol officer, Agent Maria Torres, jumped from her vehicle. A Latina woman in her early 30s, with a sharp jawline, dark ponytail, and eyes that burned with authority. "Get them clear!" she shouted to her team. She caught sight of Ethan and Rex through the smoke. "Who the hell are you?" Ethan, panting, bloodied, raised his hands. "The reason you found this place," he said. Maria studied him for a beat, then nodded. "Then get moving." By dawn, the compound was secured. Over 80 victims had been freed, their tears mixing with the dust and dawn light. Ambulances lined the desert road, carrying the rescued away. Grace sat on the back of a patrol truck, her hands trembling as the adrenaline faded. Ethan stood beside her, shoulder bandaged by Maria herself. Rex rested at his feet, fur singed but unharmed, his golden eyes alert even in exhaustion. Grace looked at Ethan and said quietly, "We did it." He nodded, gazing toward the rising sun. "One camp," he said. "But Hale's still out there, and he won't stop." Grace's eyes hardened. "Then neither will we." The storm came hard and fast over Memphis, slamming the city with sheets of rain that blurred the skyline into a trembling watercolor of lightning and shadow. The streets shimmered like black glass, and thunder rolled across the rooftops like the growl of something ancient and angry. Inside an abandoned warehouse near the Wolf River, Ethan Ward sat by a small lamp, his left shoulder still bandaged from Santa Rosa. The light caught the sharp lines of his face, casting half of it into darkness. His once steady hands now bore faint tremors, not from fear, but from exhaustion. Grace Miller was beside him, typing furiously on the encrypted tablet they had taken from Sentinel Dynamics. Her auburn hair was still damp, strands sticking to her neck, and her expression was one of controlled determination. The glow of the screen reflected in her green eyes as lines of data scrolled past. Shipment codes, routes, personnel lists. "He's deeper than we thought," she muttered. "These files show Hale's got contacts inside the Department of Defense, and this one," she pointed at a digital signature, "this belongs to Kane Maddox." Ethan's jaw tightened at the name. Kane, his former second-in-command, the best marksman Ethan had ever trained. Back then, Kane had been the Golden Soldier, tall, broad-shouldered, buzz-cut blonde hair and sharp blue eyes, the kind that saw every weakness before it formed. But there had always been something hollow behind his grin, a void Ethan hadn't wanted to see. After Ethan's discharge, Kane stayed in, rose through the ranks, and when the rumors began about mercenary work, Ethan had chosen not to believe them. Now there was no denying it. Grace looked up. "You know him, don't you?" Ethan's gaze was fixed on the rain outside. "Yeah, I trained him. He was good, too good, but he liked control more than justice." He turned to her, eyes cold. "If Hale sent Kane, he's not coming to negotiate." Before Grace could respond, Rex's low growl echoed through the warehouse. The dog's fur bristled, head lifting toward the roof. Ethan instantly killed the lamp and drew his weapon. The only light came from lightning flashing through the cracked skylight. "We've been found," he whispered. Outside, through the storm, dark figures moved, silent, methodical. A team of 6, dressed in tactical black. The faint red glow of laser sights swept across the walls, and at their center, standing tall and motionless in the rain, was Kane Maddox. He hadn't aged much, maybe a few more scars, maybe a few less illusions. The rain slicked his tactical vest, highlighting the faded Navy SEAL trident tattoo on his arm. He moved with the same measured confidence he'd once shown under Ethan's command. But now, there was something colder in his eyes, something mechanical. He raised his radio. "Ward's here, take him alive. The woman's optional." Ethan motioned to Grace. "Go." He mouthed. She shook her head fiercely. "Not without you." There was no time to argue. The first explosion hit, a breaching charge against the side door. Metal screamed. Bullets shredded the shadows. Ethan returned fire, taking out one of the mercenaries before pulling Grace toward a back stairwell. Rex darted ahead, barking, leading them through the maze of rusted corridors. They burst through a metal hatch that led into the old storm drain system. Tunnels that ran beneath the city like arteries. The stench of wet concrete and oil filled the air. Water dripped in slow echoes. Behind them, the gunfire grew distant but not gone. Ethan pressed his back against the wall, listening. Grace clutched the tablet to her chest, her breath ragged. "How do they keep finding us?" "They're tracking me," Ethan said grimly. "Military beacon implant. I had it since my last tour. I thought it was disabled." Grace frowned. "Can you remove it?" He nodded, already pulling a small combat knife. "You'll need to do it." Her eyes widened. "What? I can't." He handed her the knife, steady as ever. "You can. Back of my shoulder under the scar. It'll feel like hell, but it's better than dying." Rex stood guard, growling at every echo as lightning cracked above through the grates. Grace's hands trembled as she cut into his skin, searching, until the small metallic chip glinted under the dim flashlight. She yanked it out and threw it into the runoff channel. Ethan winced, but said nothing. Moments later, a sharp metallic clang echoed. Boots hitting the tunnel floor, Kane's voice carried down the corridor. "You always taught me to finish what I start, Ward." Ethan gritted his teeth. "You were a better student than I thought." Kane's laughter bounced off the walls. "You think you're still fighting for something pure? You were tossed aside like garbage, and I learned the truth. Power wins, not virtue." Ethan motioned to Grace to move. She hesitated, then followed, crouching low as they waded through knee-high water. The tunnel split ahead, one leading toward the river, the other deeper into the maintenance system. Ethan chose left. Behind them, the sound of Kane's footsteps grew louder, more deliberate. A flash of movement, a shadow dropped from a ladder above. Kane lunged, tackling Ethan into the water. They hit the ground hard, fists and elbows flying. Ethan blocked a blow, countered with one to the ribs, but Kane was faster, stronger. "You taught me everything I know," Kane hissed, slamming Ethan's head against the wall. "And you forgot the part about honor," Ethan growled. He drove his knee up, knocking Kane back. Rex leapt, teeth sinking into Kane's forearm. The man roared, throwing the dog aside. Grace fired her pistol. The bullet grazed Kane's leg. "Move!" Ethan shouted, pulling her down the tunnel again. They ran until the tunnel opened into the sewer outflow near the river. Rain hammered the surface like glass shards. Ethan boosted Grace up the concrete ledge, then lifted Rex. Kane appeared again at the far end, limping but relentless, rifle raised. Lightning flashed, illuminating his face twisted with fury. "You can't run forever," he shouted. Ethan turned, rain streaming down his face. I don't plan to. He fired once. The shot struck a pipeline valve above Kane's head. Steam burst out, scalding hot, enveloping the tunnel in white fog. The last thing Ethan saw was Kane's silhouette disappearing in the mist. They collapsed on the riverbank, soaked and shaking. For a long while, there was only the sound of rain and thunder. Grace turned to him, eyes glistening. "You didn't have to save me back there." Ethan looked up at the storm, voice low. "You weren't the only one worth saving." Rex nudged his hand, and Ethan gave a faint, tired smile. Beneath the roar of the rain, their hands found each other, not as soldier and witness, but as two people who had seen too much and still refused to surrender. Grace met his eyes, her expression steady but heavy with emotion. "And Kane?" Ethan's voice was low. "If he's here, I'll deal with him." They slipped through the outer fence under the cover of a sandstorm rolling in from the south. The air filled with grit, turning the hangar lights into ghostly halos. Rex led the way, weaving between supply crates until they reached a side door. Ethan cracked it open with a pry bar, the metal groaning softly. Inside, the noise of machinery and shouting workers drowned out the storm. Grace and Jack split off toward the control room, while Ethan moved toward the main floor, blending into the chaos. He watched from behind a stack of crates as Hale barked orders into a satellite phone. The man's arrogance was palpable. "Yes, everything's on schedule," Hale said. "By sunrise, we're out of U.S. airspace. They can't touch us after that." In the control room, Grace connected Jack's tablet to the main console. Rows of monitors flickered to life, revealing manifests, encrypted ledgers, and live feeds from surveillance drones. Jack's fingers danced across the keyboard, sweat beading on his brow. "Copying now," he whispered. 2 minutes." Grace kept her eyes on the door, gun ready. "You've got one," she muttered. The alarm went off before the minute was up, a shrill, metallic scream that shattered the desert silence. Red lights strobed through the hangar. Someone had spotted Ethan near the floor. Hale spun, shouting, "Seal the exits! No one leaves!" Gunfire erupted. Ethan dove for cover, returning fire with surgical precision. The air filled with smoke and shouting as workers scattered. Rex lunged into the chaos, tackling a guard who had tried to flank Ethan. Grace grabbed Jack's arm. "Download's at 80%. Hold it!" From the far end of the hangar, a new voice cut through the noise, a voice that sent a chill down Ethan's spine. Kane Maddox stepped out from the shadows, rifle in hand, his leg still stiff from the wound Ethan had given him. The flickering red light made his face look carved from iron. "You should have stayed buried, Ward," he said. Ethan stood slowly, eyes locked on his former protege. "You've already sold your soul, Kane. Don't sell your honor, too." Kane smirked. "Honor doesn't pay." The two men circled each other between the crates, bullets whining overhead. When the first flash of lightning cut through the open hangar doors, they moved at once. Kane fired first, grazing Ethan's arm. Ethan rolled, shot back, catching Kane in the shoulder. Both men hit the ground, bleeding, panting. Meanwhile, Grace and Jack fought to finish the transfer. The terminal beeped. Complete. "We got it," Jack shouted. He yanked the hard drive free, but when they turned toward the exit, Hale was there, pistol raised. His expression was calm, almost polite. "Detective Miller," he said smoothly. "I admire your persistence." Grace froze, weapon trained on him. "It's over, Hale. You're done." Hale smiled. "No, my dear. You're done." He squeezed the trigger. The shot echoed. Rex moved before anyone else could. The dog lunged across the room, colliding with Grace just as the bullet left the barrel. The impact spun them both to the floor. Grace's scream tore through the hangar as Rex collapsed beside her, blood blooming across his tan fur. Ethan heard the cry and turned, rage igniting in his chest. He charged through the smoke, tackling Hale before the man could fire again. The gun clattered away. Ethan's fist connected once, twice, until Hale's face was a ruin of blood and fury. Grace crawled to Rex, pressing her hands to his wound, whispering his name. Ethan grabbed Hale by the collar, hauling him upright. "You're going to live," he snarled. "You're going to tell them everything." Hale spat blood, sneering. "You think you're a hero? The world doesn't care." "Maybe not," Ethan said, tightening his grip. "But she does, and that's enough." He struck him once more, knocking him unconscious. Outside, sirens wailed, Border Patrol and federal agents, drawn by the anonymous signal Jack had sent minutes earlier. Floodlights pierced the storm as tactical teams swarmed the airfield. Kane, bleeding and beaten, vanished into the shadows, leaving behind the wreckage of Hale's empire. Grace knelt beside Rex as medics rushed in. Ethan crouched beside her, hand trembling as he touched the dog's paw. "He saved you," he whispered. Tears streaked Grace's dirt-covered cheeks. "He saved us all." Above them, dawn broke over the desert, washing the blood and dust in gold. The nightmare was over, or at least this part of it. The files were safe, Hale was in custody, and the network that had thrived in silence was finally exposed to the light. Ethan looked at Grace, his voice low, steady. "It's done." She met his gaze, her eyes fierce and wet. "No," she said. "It's just beginning." Morning light spilled gently over the Blue Ridge Mountains, painting Asheville, North Carolina, in soft hues of gold and green. The city moved at its own unhurried rhythm, the sound of distant church bells, bicycles passing on cobbled streets, and the hum of life that felt far removed from the chaos of war and betrayal. On the corner of Maple and 3rd, a small coffee shop had become a quiet landmark in the neighborhood. Its sign, hand-painted in elegant cursive, read, "Rex and Roses." Inside, the smell of freshly ground beans mingled with the sweetness of baked pastries. A bell chimed softly as Grace Miller stepped in, sunlight catching in her auburn hair. She wore a simple cream blouse and jeans, her once guarded expression now softened by peace. Her green eyes, though still carrying traces of the storms she had weathered, reflected warmth and quiet strength. Holding her hand was Liam, now 6 years old, his mop of golden curls bouncing as he gazed around the cafe with curiosity. "Mom," he whispered, tugging her sleeve. "Is this where he works?" Grace smiled, the corners of her lips trembling with something between nostalgia and joy. "Yes, sweetheart. This is where everything finally feels safe." Behind the counter, Ethan Ward wiped down the espresso machine. Time had reshaped him. His hair was shorter now, flecked with silver near the temples. The scars along his arms were still visible, but the hardness in his gaze had softened. He wore a faded gray shirt rolled to the elbows and an apron that read, "Owner, Est, 2026. Despite the simple life, there was still something undeniably soldierly about the way he stood. Alert, grounded, ready for whatever came next. When he saw them, his face broke into the kind of smile that didn't come easily to men like him. One earned through pain, loss, and healing. "You're early," he said, stepping around the counter. Grace shrugged playfully. Couldn't wait. At her feet, a familiar bark echoed. Rex trotted out from the back room, his gait still slightly uneven from the bullet wound that had nearly ended him. His fur had grown back around the scar on his shoulder, and though older now, 8 years old and dignified, his amber eyes still burned with that fierce intelligence. He padded over to Liam and nudged the boy's hand with his nose. Liam's laughter filled the cafe. "Hi, Rex." Grace knelt, running her fingers through the dog's fur. "The vet said he wouldn't make it," she whispered, her voice breaking slightly. "But he always proved people wrong." Ethan placed a hand on her shoulder. "So did you." The morning crowd trickled in. Locals, hikers, and a few retired veterans who made the place their routine stop. At one table sat Harold Quinn, a former Marine in his late 60s, with a weathered face and a gray beard trimmed close to the jaw. Harold came every morning, always ordering the same: black coffee, 2 sugars. He nodded toward Ethan with a grin. "Told you, Ward, a soldier never really retires. He just changes his battlefield." Ethan chuckled. "Yeah, but this one smells better." Liam wandered toward a corner wall lined with photographs. Each frame told a story. Images of mountain landscapes, charity fundraisers, and local rescue events. But one photo stood out, framed in dark wood. It showed Ethan and Grace standing outside the very same hangar in Arizona, the rising sun at their backs. Between them, Rex sat proudly, a bandage around his chest. Below it, a brass plaque read, "For those who fought in silence, so others could live in peace." Grace joined her son, her hand resting lightly on his shoulder. "That's where your mom met your stepdad," she said softly. Liam looked up with wide eyes. "Was it scary?" She hesitated, then smiled. It was, but he made it less so. Outside, the day unfolded lazily. A light breeze carried the scent of rain from the mountains. The cafe's front door opened again, and Maria Torres, now in civilian clothes, entered with her Border Patrol badge tucked away in her purse. Her dark hair was tied back, and her once hardened expression had softened into something almost maternal. She waved. "Couldn't pass through town without checking if the coffee's still good." Ethan grinned. "It's better. We upgraded from military rations." Maria laughed, joining Harold at the counter. "Good, because I still have nightmares about those." She turned serious for a moment. "By the way, Hale's trial starts next week. Federals stacked with evidence. You did good, Ward. You all did." Grace's eyes met Ethan's. There was relief there, but also a quiet understanding, the kind that comes only after loss. "And Kane?" she asked. Maria's smile faded. "Still off the grid. Rumor says he vanished south of the border, but the Bureau's watching." Ethan nodded, his expression unreadable. "He won't stay hidden forever." The rest of the day passed in peace. Children ran past the window chasing bubbles, laughter mixed with the gentle hum of conversation. Grace moved behind the counter to help, her movements graceful and sure, while Ethan trained Liam on how to froth milk properly. Rex lay beside the counter, occasionally wagging his tail when someone dropped crumbs. As the sun dipped behind the hills, painting the cafe in amber light, Ethan closed the register and turned the open sign to closed. The last of the customers left with soft goodbyes. Grace leaned against the counter, eyes on him. "Do you ever miss it?" He looked up, brow raised. "The Navy?" "The fight," she said quietly. Ethan thought for a moment, then looked toward the window where Rex lay beside Liam, the boy sketching something in a notebook. "Sometimes," he admitted. "But then I see this." His voice softened, and I remember why I stopped. Grace smiled faintly, brushing a lock of hair from her face. You didn't stop, Ethan. You just found a better reason to keep going. He took her hand gently. You both did that for me. The night settled softly over Asheville. The street lamps flickered to life, casting halos of light on the wet pavement. Inside wrecks and roses, the world was quiet. Just the soft sound of a child's laughter, the purr of the espresso machine cooling down, and the steady rhythm of a dog's breathing. On the far wall, beneath the photograph, hung another frame, a smaller one, added just weeks ago. It held a single picture. Grace, Ethan, Liam, and Rex standing in front of the shop on opening day. Below it, in Grace's neat handwriting, were the words, "Peace isn't the absence of war. It's the courage to keep loving after it. Sometimes, miracles don't come as lightning from heaven. They come as small, quiet mercies. A soldier who learns to forgive himself. A mother who finds the courage to love again. A wounded dog who refuses to die, reminding us that loyalty is stronger than pain. In a world that often feels dark and divided, this story is a whisper from above, a reminder that God still moves among us. He heals through love, through second chances, through the people and creatures He places in our path. If you're watching this, maybe it's not by accident. Maybe God is reminding you that your own miracle is closer than you think. So hold on. Keep believing. Keep loving even when it hurts. Because faith doesn't erase the storm. It gives us the strength to walk through it. Before you go, share this story with someone who needs hope today. Tell us in the comments where you're watching from. We love to see how far faith travels. And if this story touched your heart, subscribe to our channel for more stories of rescue, redemption, and the quiet miracles God still writes every day.